Gridiron 360. We're hitting it. Dave, Bill, it is, what day is
March 25th.
it? 25th? I thought it was the 24th.
That was yesterday, my friend.
I am
And you should know this because you got to
losing my
teach your kids
I
every
know.
day.
Well,
You
that's
know,
the
don't you have to know the
problem.
date?
Quarantine day too many. It is Wednesday. We are on the PM side of the day here, Eastern Standard Time. And we're jumping back in with a little bit of our comment ball. This will be 8.0, Mr. Dave.
All right.
Today, we are addressing you, Mr. Pat Moore. Thank you for commenting. Good, bad, indifferent, as we always say. We appreciate it. I think I hit you back, and we wanted to get this thing up and out for you. So sorry for the delay. Thank you to all the listeners and everyone subscribing, commenting. We've been tightening these things up and trying to make them more specific so you can go to who you want to go to, teams, conferences. And but we do appreciate it. And you gave us some good feedback, my friend. Mr. Pat Moore, Dave. This was in regards to our Seattle Seahawks podcast, Talking Free Agency. Will you read Mr. Moore's comments, please?
I will. All right. So, Pat Moore says, Britt is likely a cap casualty. 100% Chris Carson will again be the starting running back. Penny will do very little this year as he recovers from an ACL. Ansa was useless and will not be resigned. Cut. Their young receivers will be fine, probably. Won't see them draft one until the 4th round. First 3 rounds will likely be DN, O-line tackle, maybe D-back, or best player available in that order. The only real question is who will they sign at D-end in free agency. Last comment, kind of interesting. It's clear you haven't done your homework. Boo! Boo!
Boo on us.
All
Damn.
right.
Harsh.
All right.
Harsh, dude.
Miss.
Should I begin? Or let me go into a couple things. The running back room. That's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
I get it. Chris Carson's your guy. You're a Seattle fan. You like him. He's been a good pickup with you guys.
Yep.
He has had troubles in the past with fumbling. He's had injury issues in the past. And you drafted Rashad Penny just, a couple, 3 years back. I think the mindset there was he was going to be your guy. Russ and him. And Carson was a piece, kind of like bringing in Mahomes behind Alex Smith and just letting him, sit and get ready for a year, get some snaps. Same thing in the running back room. You can do that there too. Unfortunately, you just really haven't seen him want to take the reins, that being Rashad Penny. Whether it be just not producing the way you expected or at the end of this season, he had the ACL injury. Now, mind you, I did see some flash from him this year. That
Especially in the later part of the year.
And I think that's kind of what you expected all along. I think when we talked about this team, there's not a lot of needs that they need to fill, but in the draft, and I don't think I said in free agency, there's a pretty good running back class here. And you might be able to find, how much longer Chris Carson's great. If you had that Saquon, Zeke, Derrick Henry, somebody that is the guy behind a Russ Wilson, then, like you said, with those young receivers, I think that'd be pretty good. And if you have you don't have a lot of needs to fill in my mind. That might be something you look at in a young back late in the draft.
All right. You kind of stepped right into the detail. I want to back this up a little bit. Just a little bit of context for everybody listening is, again, I like to comment. I'm gonna battle you back, but that's the fun banter of sports. And certainly would love to hear a reply to anything I say. One, you mentioned Britt is likely a cap casualty. He was. You guys have brought in BJ Finney. He is now, I guess, projected to play center for them, even though he was a guard. That's where he's showing out of Pittsburgh. So good information there. We posted this on March 16th. You replied, today's the 25th, 5 days ago, so it was on the 20th, so you had about 4 days. Understand the window to free agency tampering had just started as we posted this, and likely I think this is one we recorded the day before, or maybe even the Friday before, to be honest with you, because I know we were kind of struggling to get some of them out with the quarantine with our producer. So some information was not available. I want to say this, so just understand something. Seattle, when we're talking about this, it's great to say like D-end. Like it's an obvious need, okay? It's an obvious
Every
need.
team could use it for the most part.
Yeah, and you obviously traded for a player last year in Clowney to get some value out of the D-end. But you do have to look at, you can't just say, oh, here's what we're going to do in free agency, and this is who we're going for, because you have two major problems. You got players available and cap space. In the draft, you have players available. We've talked about, from a drafting perspective, the challenge for them and why they're going to be pressed on the D-end is because the D-end grouping is one of the thinner positions in the
this
draft.
year's draft, yes.
You really only have, in people's mind, maybe 2 first-rounders, and Epineza took a step back. But, and again, the problem's going to be there's going to be no pro days now. So
I still think if you look at his body of work, he's going to be solid, but he is a different D-end, which we've said before, than a Chase Young. He's a big power guy.
Yeah.
And Chase Young is, well, he's got power too, but he's more of a speedster, with the hands.
And here
I do like that Pat did go, what you said, first 3 rounds, likely DN, offensive lineman, O tackle, maybe D-back or best available in that order. I like the specificity.
I will say, but best available.
That's right.
Is everything.
Correct.
So nothing's off the table then in your mind. Now, I get your order there, and you're right. I think here's the whole thing is.
Now, when we did this, was Irvin signed? I think he was.
No, I don't believe so. Okay. No, not when we did it. So you brought in Bruce Irvin, or brought back Bruce Irvin.
Yeah, brought Bruce Irvin back.
So you're going with age. Ansah obviously has had some wear on the tires. And Clowney's out there. And again, the problem is that position has been relatively thin. And there's obviously something wrong with some of these DNs out there, that guys like Everson Griffin, Jadeveon Clowney still remained unsigned after the first wave. And I think that's the fear of probably the asking price versus what is going to happen. So we agreed with you on DN. I just don't know if you try to force a solution when you're picking that late in the first round, if you're not really you're hopeful that your O-line, which I think O-line is definitely, tackle in particular is a possibility there.
Yeah.
But if you're pushing for a specific position, this is how you whiff in the first round. So we had to kind of wait to see how some of this stuff played out. We talked about it. It looks like they're starting to fill their O-line. So that may
he said, like I said, the first 3 rounds likely DN, O-line, O-tackle, maybe defensive back or best available. When we started that cast off, we said their needs are O-line, DN, and running back. So, okay, 2 out of 3 we agree on.
Yep.
I mean, we're
and
love you, Pat,
and running back could be best available.
We do try to do our homework, but again, we're not beat writers. We ripped through 4 or 5 days, ripped through 32 teams. I think we got some good information out there that everyone wants to hear. But
and as
again,
I speak right now,
we love this. Keep it coming.
Jermaine Ifedi, a former Seattle Seahawks first-round O-line, will sign a 1-year deal with Chicago. I'm assuming that's as a swing tackle for the Bears. So that literally just happened within the last few minutes on March 25th at around 2:30. So let me just say this. So let me now dial back into your running back comment. I want to kind of finish up with what you're saying. Remember what we said. You're even saying it yourself. Best player available. To me, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round running backs this year are going to be some of the best running backs you are going to find this year. Unless there's a run. And if you listen to any one of our podcasts where we mention running back, it's the same thing. We're not talking about first rounders. We're not talking about J.K. Dobbins. We're not talking about Jonathan Taylor.
Zach Taylors.
Zach Moss.
Or Zach Moss.
You got
Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU.
You got the kid from Florida State in Cam Akers.
I mean, these are guys that you're going to be able to get in maybe even past the second round.
And let me break down your current running back room. One, I'm always very careful. If you look at the turnaround time on ACL injuries, I'm not saying people come back to form, but when they're actually able to suit up, it is not the 1-year killer like it used to be. You'll remember Adrian Peterson blew out his knee at the end of a year, kind of later in his prime, and came back and ran for 2,000 yards. I don't see Penny as that type of running back, so I agree with you.
But he is younger than
he's young,
Peterson
right?
was.
But I think he is going to be on the shelf for a while. And you say Chris Carson 100% your starting running back. I don't necessarily disagree with you coming into the season, but I don't think that's where Seattle wants to end the season.
I don't think that they've gone through a season with the one guy really that they know is that guy.
Well, here's the whole thing about Chris Carson. I've watched him. Again, this is a guy I've had on my fantasy team, so I mean I've kind of paid a little bit closer attention to him in the game stretches. This is a guy that's had games where he's put the ball on the ground a couple of times and been pulled. Is that the guy you're going to hitch your wagons to? And there's a lot to like about him. And I don't care what anybody says, with Russell Wilson and his arm talent in your passing game, you are a running team. You've always done that. You've been a running team. You do it maybe not in the standard orthodox manner, but the truth of the matter is you just said best player available. I don't know that there's going to be a DN for you out there that's going to make sense for your lineup. Do I agree you can let Ansa walk? Do I think Ansa's special? No, but at some point
I did say you have Ezekiel Ansa and he's all right. And look, I stepped in a little bit. I was looking at some stats. The thing he does best is he's a fumble guy. He can create and recover fumbles.
How many teams can afford to dump 2/3 of their starting without recovering something?
I know. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying he needs to be the guy. We said DN. If you get like a really a better young DN, and maybe this is Bruce Irvin, then Ansa doesn't become the focal point of the edge, right? Then you have somebody on the other side that is.
Yeah, and when we talked about, like, another example, you talked about wide receiver in the podcast. And what you had brought up is we talked about DK Metcalf. We talked about Lockett. Okay, there's your 1-2.
Yep.
And we talked about your tight ends. Your tight end room looks pretty strong in my mind, especially coming off an injury. If they're healthy, you got some options. And then you signed Olsen. But the simple point is you were talking about how many of their bottom-tier receivers, their 3 and particularly 4 and 5 and 6 receivers, that they had let go. And a perfect example is they signed Philip Dorsett in the interim. So
he was the only guy, I guess, more not phenomenal, but on a consistent basis week in, week out to see the field and be an option for Brady.
And let me just say this. I think the biggest splash money they were going to spend was on DN. They didn't. But I also want to look at it, and I'm thinking about it from the concept of, does this team get better? And I do want to say, from a pass rush standpoint, I like the Reed signing. Like, that's the D tackle, so they filled some of that. They're shoring up that line. I'm not sure that your edge rushing has gotten better at this point. And you don't like Ansa, and Clowney is yet to be seen. Hopefully, I think for a lot of teams, and it would probably give Seattle a little bit of the front running position in this, is that everybody's taking a wait and see because they want to drive down the price on Clowney a little bit because maybe they just didn't see enough out of him, and maybe that gives you an opportunity. But and going in that and like not doing your homework, like we have to be realistic. We can't just look at these things and say, oh, okay, this is what your needs are and go get them. Like the Bears need a quarterback, but that doesn't mean they could go pay for Teddy Bridgewater.
No, I mean,
it's just a reality. And they're one of one of 32 teams.
Well, and I do think Pat kind of alluded to it, like best player available after those first things, and that's right, because that's essentially, it's hard to really pinpoint when you get past those first couple rounds, and even then. It's hard because, you know, we've seen in past drafts things get kooky. And all of a sudden, like you said earlier, there's a run on certain guys. And you're like, oh, God, how'd that happen? This guy that I was going to pick, in the late second round as an edge rusher, all of a sudden is gone at the end of the first.
Yeah, and I think right now there's a good thing that there's not a run on DNs yet. There has not been a big push. Some teams have made some, I'll call them mildly surprising moves. Like a Robert Quinn coming off the board. That's not a guy that everybody was clamoring to go after and get initially. And so probably the front runners for this may be the ones, maybe that does help you guys. And maybe there is, I can go sign an Everson Griffin on a cheaper deal than what most people thought.
What's the cap space at as we speak?
They are at $15 million in cap space available. They're roughly around still the middle of the pack. Again, got to sign draft picks. I think.
How much just as a rough guesstimate, how much money, just for the listeners, when you go into the draft and you bring these rooks in, how much money needs to be set aside roughly? Are we talking $5 or $6 million?
I'm thinking. Well, it depends. Obviously, if you're slotted early in the first round, because the first round's your big hit. I would say
like
for
Joe
Seattle,
Burrow is going to chew up some money.
Yeah,
More
he's
than
probably going to
most.
get. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think of Mitch Trubisky at number 2. What his contract was. I think it was 4 years, maybe 55 million. I don't know. I'm off a little bit. My guess would be for Seattle, they probably have to be somewhere in the 8 to 9 range in
Okay,
total.
so then you're talking
maybe not that much because second rounders. Yeah, they might be less than that. It might be more like
So
7.
maybe they have 6 or 7, maybe 8 million left for in the tank for free agency.
And the hard part is here's something that's hard to do with the cap space right now. Cap space is a complicated formula, as most people know. I use over the cap because I've heard most people talk about that and say that that's one of the most accurate and up to date. But part of the problem is, for example, they were trying to do cap space, but they generally make their moves on their cap space at the time when a contract is signed. Obviously, with the tampering period, there's contracts that are announced but not yet signed. But then there's also contracts with players that require a physical. And if you don't know right now with coronavirus, some of these trades are still technically not done because they can't get players in to get physicals done. And it's, and over the cap is trying to determine, is there a potential for a failed physical? Meaning I traded for a guy that's coming off an injury and could blow up the trade. So again, I don't want to, I'm not saying it's gospel, but it is, they are generally pretty much on the button and they do update it frequently right now. So
what I will say is, and again, we talk about the sites we use. I look at for the depth chart. I usually go to Our Lads, OURLADS.com. And if you look at their depth chart, which is usually to date, their front line is, and even behind that, they're filled. In other words, you do see a good mix of guys off to the right on the screen in red who are free agents still, but outside, or some of them have already made moves and they show you, but outside of that, if you look at their first line of offense and defense, and even their second, they've got guys. So they've got their positions.
This was a very good team last year.
So now you've got, again, maybe 6, 7, 8 million left in free agency to play with. What are you going to do? Are you going to resign some of these guys still out there that were on the team that you think are good pieces? Or are you going to try to use it and go, or maybe someone else gets cut we don't know of to give you more room?
Well, here's the other part to this
it's constantly
that
moving.
People don't talk about. You hear about all this dead money happening, and when you get into ugly dead money situations, it's generally because you've restructured a contract and moved money back. Teams generally at this stage have an idea of probably 2 to 3 guys that they can restructure and move money back if they want to make a move in free agency, if they find a good value. But they don't want to do that until they get close and are ready to sign, because they don't want to, because you're impacting cap space in 2021, 2022. So they really hold on to that. So something to be aware of with that is cap space is a moving thing, and it has to do with how you convert things into signing bonuses. And generally, when you restructure a contract, there's a benefit thrown in to the player. So, for example, again, one that I am very familiar with, the Bears, when they got Foles, they redid his contract. So when they redid his contract and moved some of his money, it basically became a 2-year deal. But one of the benefits he got out of that is he is able to opt out of his contract each of the first 2 years. So if he finds himself, say Trubisky, and I'm not saying this, but just as an example, if he takes off and plays really well and Foles is like, I want to go get somewhere where I can play, he can opt out of that contract. Or if he wins the Super Bowl and says, I'm worth a hell of a lot more money than this, he can opt out and go into free agency. So there's usually something they can do, but that's why teams are kind of wary of doing that until they need it. So it's not necessarily to say you only have $8 million to play with, but like draft picks, when you trade them away, you leverage something in the future for today.
I'm just trying to give a guesstimate so you can see, and then if you all of a sudden you see this guy was cut from your team, and it'll say opens up, so just like the Cam thing. Now Cam's a little higher of a name, but if you get the notifications from ESPN, Bleacher Report, wherever you do or don't go, Cam got loose and said opens up $19.5 million is what they said roughly. That they get back. So, that's why I'm saying if we're giving the listener a rough estimate of where it stands as it is, and then if you're a fan of that team, more than likely you get notifications on your team from somewhere on your phone. If you see that person dropped and cut, then you could just add that money into what you have still to spend.
Yep. Yeah. So understand, I don't think that they're out of the market. I think this, like I said, I think the DN market is evolving to their potentially to their benefit.
I do too. I just don't. I don't know if they, Clowney's going to be somebody they bring back in. I just think they would try. I think both parties want to try to go different ways.
Yeah, but again, when that first round of chaos happens, plans start to change.
Sure.
They start to change. There's that guy you want, and then there's the guy you can get, and then there's the guy I didn't expect to be available later on. And so some of that can happen. I think this is a team, obviously, you are competing with San Francisco, who is on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
Arizona played some tough games and is getting better. I think the Rams are going to be kind of flatlined to maybe even slipping a little bit. But San Francisco is enough to make this a challenge. And just so you know how I felt about Seattle, I had told you last year, probably a little more than halfway through the season, I still believe Seattle was going to win the division.
Yeah.
Because they just figure out ways to do that. And I think this is a very creative team. I just
Coach.
The only thing this is the part, I guess, not doing our homework that was a little bit curious was we agreed with you on most of this stuff. I still tell you there's going to be value in that running back, and especially if Penny isn't playing.
Yeah.
I think they're nuts if they don't invest in a running back in the second or third round.
I'm looking at the depth chart. They have a couple guys. They have a few guys behind them, but I know at least one of them, if not two. Proslice is a free agent. Did he get signed? I thought he might have.
I didn't
but
see him on
behind
here
Penny in the third slot is Travis Homer from Miami, and behind him in the fourth slot is Adam Choice from Clemson. So if I'm not mistaken, has Homer been there beyond his rookie years? I think he still could be under the 4.5. So those are two cheaper guys you have behind at running back. I love Adam Choice. I think he's great. I don't know if he's a starting NFL running back. Same with Travis Homer. We've seen him in some spots, and wasn't he in Miami for a little while with the dog? I don't know. Both those guys.
Here's my point.
Again, that there could be a lot of value later rounds of the draft at running back.
Chris Carson has fallen out of favor at times in his career there. At times he's been solid. And my point is, if he falls out of favor and Rashad Penny's not an option, do you feel good with the rest of that running back room? And the whole point is you got to get younger and you got to get better. And so I'm expecting to see that. So I agree with you on the wide receiver. I think wide receiver is something you can look at later in the draft and maybe get somebody that's, slips and falls. And that's the point is you are in the draft position right now where I just think it's a major mistake. You can have needs, but if your needs aren't there, you don't reach. And that's where teams get in trouble. And I got to say, I don't see Seattle do it a lot.
Well, sometimes.
I mean, they've missed, but it's one thing to
When they drafted
miss.
Bruce Irvin, he wasn't projected to go as high as they drafted him, but he turned.
But he didn't miss. He didn't miss.
No, you're right.
But my point is you can't
turned out
miss.
to be a good player.
That's good scouting.
Yep. All right, so look, we're going to wrap it up here. Comment Ball 8.0. Pat Moore, thank you, my friend. We appreciate you, dog. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. We need it. We like it. It gives us more stuff to talk about in these times where there's no sports. There is a lot of NFL talk out there right now because
that's all there is.
That's all right. So we're glad you're finding us. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time. As always,
On the gridiron.
see ya.